So there is a pretty big time controversy going on in the United States currently online, and it has manifested itself inside of Congress. And this has to do with Representative Ilhan Omar. Now, she called out APAC and was basically saying that politicians are very compelled to have a position in favor of Israel due to the influence of the pro Israel lobby in the United States, which is, you know, first of all, there are people who are trying to, like, contest that, like, A, it exists, and B, what its influence is, which was hilarious. I couldn't believe that. I mean, it's very well known about APAC. A really interesting one, George H.W. Bush, who is a Republican, white Republican, okay, President of the United States. He said, I'm going to paraphrase here. He said, there's about 1,000 lobbyists over on the Hill trying to convince Congress, while a little old me is here trying to ask Congress for a 120-day freeze on loan guarantees because Israel's not freezing their illegal settlements. So you're talking about a Republican president being, feeling like a little guy getting outnumbered by these lobbyists, that's absolutely insane, dude. It's crazy. By the way, HW, last president to really stand up to Israel. And he ended up paying for that, by the way. The Jewish vote ended up going more in favor of Bill Clinton. I believe his numbers went down and Bill Clinton's was boosted. And these kinds of things are the reason why the Israeli lobby is so big. So this isn't some conspiracy like Jews run the world or something like that. It's like, no. If you look at APAC, and I believe their description on their Twitter is like a pro-Israel lobby. It says it out and out. We know that's not controversial or contestable, okay? So, as we know, Ben Shapiro is somebody who is supposedly against, identity politics, and he's one of those guys who's against victim complexes, sort of like Tomi Lahren, and he is somebody who hypocritically participates in the spamming of the anti-Semite button, which means he just screams anti-Semite at any point, no matter what, because it just serves him the best. An example of that, Patton Oswalt got into a beef with him once on Twitter, and Patton Oswalt compared him to Irving Kristol, who I guess is the father of neoconservatism, and Ben Shapiro was like, you're an anti-Semite, you are grouping us together because we're Jewish, when the reason why he was being grouped together was because they're both neocons. Anyway, so Ben Shapiro sent out this tweet saying, "Oh, I'm glad that your anti-Semitic House Foreign Affairs Committee member has decided to combat anti-Semitism in all of its forms. You know what one form would be? Resigning. Another form, you dumping her from the House Foreign Affairs Committee." That's in response to Nancy Pelosi. The establishment Democrats ended up basically forcing Ilhan Omar to apologize, and we'll get to the apology later, but Ilhan kind of apologized, but reaffirmed her statement that my statement was in opposition to APAC, so it's not really like a full-on apology like you would expect. Now, Kyle Kulinski called this out. He actually, put out a response himself. He said, "Right-wingers, when will these false cries of bigotry stop?" And then he has also right-wingers, and of course, he shows the quote tweet from Ben Shapiro, and this couldn't be any more on point. Especially because, guys, Ben Shapiro, this is the guy where there's literally a tweet that is still up, and he's not going to delete it because it's probably not a good look for him. And he has a tweet out where he said, Israelis like to build, Arabs like to bomb crap, hashtag settlements rock. So in that, you are being, blatantly bigoted and grouping these people and saying what their ideals are. And on top of that, you're also, just like very easily, just supporting the breaking of international law, okay, which is insane. So we're talking about this guy. By the way, guys, he's had a really weird association with Steve King, where, remember the recent comments that came out? He had been defending Steve King up until recently, where he was like, "Oh, why are these terms unacceptable, or why do you look at them as bad?" And it's like, what? This guy, there's pictures of him hugging him. He's done like speeches for him and shit. That's the guy we're talking about here who's trying to claim that there's bigotry, and he has an vested interest here because, remember, after the whole Pittsburgh thing that happened, he was out there trying to make it seem like the real anti-Semitism is on the left. I believe he said that verbatim, basically, at one of his speeches he was giving. So he has an vested interest here. Don't get it twisted. He has an vested interest in attempting to make the left look like anti-Semites because he's trying to make, he wants to make the Jewish vote go more Republican. I believe Obama got like 70% the first time, and then I forgot how much he got the second time, probably in the 50s or 60s. But it's really embarrassing on the part of Ben Shapiro, as you guys would all expect. But there was another tweet that he sent out that Mike Figueredo from the Humanist Report actually responded to. He said, "This weekend, Jewish money is behind American support for Israel. I mean APAC. Now, I apologize for the anti-Semitic slur. APAC is behind American support for Israel." So he's trying to do some sort of a gotcha on Ilhan Omar by, basically saying it's a fake apology as well as this kind of like a self-save. She never said Jewish money. She had that like all about the Benjamins tweet, and then she responded by saying APAC in a question as to what she's referencing and what she's talking about. But, Mike responded saying, criticizing the Israeli government's genocidal apartheid state and the money it spends lobbying to maintain that status quo is anti-Semitism, but letting a baker deny service to same-sex couples is not homophobia. Cool. So, of course, just pointing out the blatant hypocrisy of this statement, and it all lies in this, ridiculous fallacy that criticizing Israel is somehow anti-Semitic, and now criticizing the very clear APAC lobby. And by the way, Howard Dean, who sucks really big time, apparently he was a progressive back when he ran in 2004, but now he's just a douche, corrupt douche. He even had a tweet out saying that APAC it's basically an arm for the Republican Party, and that Netanyahu has made an enemy of the Democratic Party. So even Howard Dean gets it. Like APAC is, it has influence just like any other lobby does. So the idea of trying to contest this in the first place is hilariously stupid because it doesn't make sense. But so to talk about the Ilhan Omar apology, I saw that Kyle was really pissed. I don't think that that's the right response. First of all, her apology wasn't really an apology for what she said. And she was kind of cornered into that because you're talking about the establishment Democrats and the Republicans coming together to threaten to take you off the committee, and as well as literally some people were calling to expel her, others were calling for censure, which means, they're going to formally condemn Ilhan Omar's statements, which they didn't do with Steve King. They took him off the committee that he was on, I believe, and so they wanted something like this done. And so I think she did that because she was like, shit, I'm kind of like facing a lot of heat here. But I don't think she did it in a way that minimizes what she said. In fact, all the responses to the apology are saying, oh, it's not really an apology. So, I don't really see a problem in what she did. But this is essentially the beginning of hopefully what will be the change of the Overton window. And that's what I think I'm seeing, because there are a lot of left-wing Jews, and this is an identity issue. And so a lot of times in a situation like this, and this is what's happening in terms of this issue, is a Jewish person's opinion is valued more than like mine, for example. So if a Jewish person comes out and says, what she said isn't anti-Semitic, and APAC is a problem, that opinion coming from a Jewish person is worth more than mine. So, and I've seen a lot of them coming out. There's a lot of blowback against Republicans and other people, and even Trump went after Ilhan for that. Like, could you imagine being Donald Trump going after that? You just made a joke about the Trail of Tears, and you recently cited Pat Buchanan, whose plan for immigration was outright based on, we want to have I believe he just wants to have more white people and wants to keep, other races out. So the idea of taking someone like Trump seriously, or someone like Ben Shapiro seriously, who still has, who has the tweet of, settlements rock, and who was buddies with Steve King. Now he's trying to distance himself, but he has maintained ties for a long time up until recently. And even his own audience didn't even take his critique of Steve King, very solidly. And so what I'm hoping happens here is we have a shift, but I'm very disappointed, but not surprised. and all of these establishment Democrats teaming up with the Republicans to bully Ilhan Omar, who is in a very vulnerable state right now of being a Muslim person who's calling out APAC and the pro-Israel lobby, and she's just in really a very vulnerable position, and it's really admirable what she's done because there is the way that the conversation is currently framed is if you critique Israel, if you criticize Israel, you are somehow anti-Semitic, which is simply not true. It's just false. That's not how it works at all. So you can critique Netanyahu for being a horrible, piece of garbage, who's a textbook corrupt politician who's been, who's had charges recommended by the Israeli police 3 times on corruption. That doesn't make you an anti-Semite. That doesn't do that. It doesn't make any sense. And so hopefully, BDS will start to gain more steam as well as a result of this. And I'm just hoping this changes. But people like Ben Shapiro and Dave Rubin is doing this dumb shit too. So, and Dave Rubin is Jewish. So for him, he's like on the side of defend Israel at all costs. He was defending them during the 2014 crazy shit that Israel was doing, where I think their attacks ended up being 90% civilians, according to the United Nations. So he was defending like schools being destroyed and shit. That's actually one of the reasons why he left TYT, was because they got into a huge debate on air, and I think he like almost cried or something like that. But it's just cringy, man. It's not a good look when you're Ben Shapiro. You've got Settlements Rock, and you've got pictures of you hugging Steve King. You aren't one to talk, and not only that, you're just flat out wrong, dude.